Because traditions are things that are passed down, amongst a culture, since we're in a digitally minded culture, there's been a lot of introduction of digital traditions. Now, some of you guys may remember, I don't remember, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, a few years ago, you woke up, you checked your email, and you got a video clip of your friends being elfed. Does anyone remember that? Yeah. Okay, where you looked and you opened it up and there was a video of maybe 2 or 3 of your friends, their heads on an elf, and they were all going like this. You remember that? That was probably the highlight of today for some of you. But we can receive traditions, that people do out in the culture. We can reject them, say, hey, this is not for us, it's not for the church. Or we can redeem them. And most of the traditions that we celebrate on Christmas has to do with that, being redeemed. There was a church leader by the name of Origin, and he preached, literally, time after time, he was a strong proponent that the birth of Christ should not be celebrated in the same way as pagan gods and just earthly kings. He said we shouldn't do that. The birth of Christ is so far above that. There were other religious leaders, such as Alexandria and Hippolytus. They said, yes, it definitely should be celebrated. Giving, exchanging gifts, having parties, not necessarily the workplace parties, because those are a whole different category than what you're celebrating in your home. But gift giving, having parties, they're all tied to the Roman Saturnalia celebrations. Greenery, bringing trees into your house, Christmas trees, lights. Charity and gift giving was tied to the Roman New Year. Yule logs, how many of you heard that term? Yule logs? Okay. Alright, Yule logs and inviting all kind of food and feasts and all that stuff were based on European feasts. And this is what the author says. It says, those type of things have always fueled arguments against the holiday, against Christmas. And here's the term that they use. They say it's because most Christians say it's just paganism wrapped in a Christian bow. But while avoiding worldliness is always a concern for Christians, the church has generally viewed efforts to reshape culture. And we've talked about that a lot. It is our goal to reshape the culture, including holidays. They've always viewed it positively. And one theologian in 320 AD said this: we hold this day, speaking of Christmas, once the church said, let's do it on the 25th of December, we hold this day holy, not like the pagans because of the birth of the Son, S-U-N, but because of Him who made it. So they picked this day, and I'm going to show you why. Chapter 17, he says this: Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, now he was in Athens, he says, men of Athens, I see that in every way you are religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription: to an unknown God. Now what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. This is pretty much what he did. He went in and he would go in and he would preach, and he said, you know what? I see that you guys are worshiping these. They had statues to a god of this, to a god of that, to a god of this, and one to an unknown God. And he said, I'm going to show you and proclaim to you, and if you read through the rest of that chapter, the God that does exist. And take that worship that you're giving to these gods who are just stone and idol and mean nothing, and direct it towards the God who created heaven and earth. And when the church was looking for how do we celebrate the birth of Christ, they said to the Roman soldiers, to the people in the culture of that time, you're worshiping the Son, S-U-N. But take that worship and that celebration and direct it towards the Son, S-O-N. And they redeemed those celebrational traditions. Don't bring a tree into your house to celebrate a God that doesn't exist, but decorate your home to celebrate the God that does. Don't give gifts to celebrate the S-U-N, but give them to celebrate the birth of the S-O-N. They redeemed all of those traditions to be used to worship the God that does exist. And you have people today that say, hey, those traditions, we shouldn't do it. It's just giving into the culture. It's not giving into the culture. It's doing what is biblical, going in and redeeming those things that don't hurt the body. Those things that we say, yeah, this can be incorporated into the church and can be used to celebrate and worship the birth of